Hi, I'm Edgar Cruz. On this video, we're going to explore the art of arranging for solo guitar. We're going to use the music of Queen for two reasons. One, the Bohemian Rhapsody is the most requested song I've ever had during my career, and keeping in that theme, I'm going to include a total of 4 Queen songs. The second reason is that the music of Queen is very rich in its harmonies and orchestration, making them excellent examples to show all the possibilities. Not only will I show you how to combine all the ingredients that you're listening to, but how to make your arrangement more guitaristic and playable. The first question I get asked is, Edgar, how do you approach your arrangements? First thing I do is I go to the music store, buy the sheet music, and look at the piano score. It's good reference as far as showing you what chords, what key signature, where the melody line is, the harmonies, and the bass notes. The second thing I do is I take an actual CD of the original recording, and I listen to that. If it matches up to the piano music, that'd be great. That's all the less work I have to worry about. If it doesn't, then I use more of my ear to work out the arrangement. Another thing you have to keep in mind is that the actual sheet music is sometimes not in a good guitaristic key, at which point you have to go in throughout all the sections, decide on what the best key is for your arrangement that you're getting ready to approach. As we go through this material, I highly suggest that you do your own comparisons. Make sure to obtain your own copy of a Queen recording and the publisher's sheet music for study references. Hopefully this video will prove that it's possible to arrange anything you are interested in and encourage you to tackle your own personal favorite. Before we go on, let's take a minute to tune up. Here's the open E string, first string. Onto the second string, B. Onto the third string, G. Fourth string, D. Fifth string, A. And sixth string, E. I'd like to take a few moments to go over the left-hand techniques. Now, these are standard classical techniques that are taught to us classical guitarists, and all these will help to make it much more efficient for you to execute some of these difficult passages. Number 1 is the common fingering. For example, a C chord to an A minor chord. You'll notice that the first finger and the second finger are completely the same in both chords. Therefore, the only thing that needs to move is the third finger, and these do not need to move. They stay completely there. Another example would be this D to this G. Now, I know some of you finger the G differently, but if you finger it this way, you will have a common fingering. And the trick to what I'm getting ready to show you is to use as many alternative fingerings as possible so we can have as many common fingerings between the two chords. Let's try one more example here. The A to the D. Notice that I use the alternative D, but I have a common fingering. Now, a lot of people think, well, why would you do that? Well, the only real advantage for me as a performer is that when I play rapid music, you know, I have something that is right there that helps me get from one point to the next point. Let's talk about the second technique, a sliding finger technique. A good example of that would be from this D to this G. Notice the third finger slides from the second fret to the third fret. Another example would be A to D. Once again, it makes the change much easier. Even if you went from a D to an E, just slide it underneath like that. A lot of people wouldn't think about doing that, but it makes this change much easier, much more efficient. That is called a sliding technique. Now, if the first two rules don't apply, we have what we call a common form. You can call it a common shape, etc. But the best example is from an A minor to an E. You'll notice that all the fingers are being picked up and placed down. Think of this as a mold. In other words, if I wasn't going to move that, I'd just pick it up in one place and place it in another. That is the best example of that. Another one would be, for example, the A7 to the D. Notice that finger 1 and 2 are exactly the same. They're just being picked up and placed down. Now let's talk about number 4, the one you want to avoid the most, and that would be a complete change. If none of the first 3 apply, then number 4 more than likely applies. If I was to do this exact same thing, A7 to a D, I would throw my fingers up in the air and fall back down. A lot of beginners do that because they want to think about where they're going, and they end up taking more time. That is more work, and we don't want to work more. We want to work less. So, another example is, for example, the C to the G7. A beginner would pick up his fingers and place it down without thinking that this would have a common form. These 2 fingers are exactly the same, so you just keep them as close to the strings and move them over. Beginner would take a D, take all his fingers off, place the E, whereas, as I told you, you have 1 finger sliding, make it a lot easier. A to D,
the 3rd finger slides,
and so on and so on. A lot of this has to do with fingering. If I'm going from this G to this C, notice that I'm having a complete change. But
if I learn to use an alternate fingering for that chord,
then I have a common finger,
as well as a common shape for the 2nd and 3rd fingers.
If you can adhere to these rules, you'll be able to execute these difficult passages with ease. Also, by applying common fingerings and sliding finger techniques, you'll be able to get a lot smoother chord changes, as opposed to playing choppy and applying the complete change method. A lot of the students sound choppy because of the complete changes. As far as my right hand goes, a lot of people ask, why are nails so long? A couple of reasons. One is that I do a lot of Latin strumming, and I like the sound that I get with the longer nails. 2 is a lot of people ask, well, how do you keep them so long? These are acrylics, which is a means of making them a lot stronger. I met a guitarist in Santa Fe, a flamenco guitarist, and I was wondering how I was going to take care of my nails since I kept putting super glue and they kept breaking. I was wondering how to make them stronger, and this guitarist came up to me afterwards, told me they were acrylics. I've been using them ever since, and I can play as hard as I want, not worry about them breaking. But let's go right into some right hand techniques and talk about the right hand. If you're not familiar, the right hand names of the fingers are P, pulgar, which is Spanish for thumb, I, indicis, which is Spanish for index finger, M is medio, which is Spanish for middle finger, and A is annular, which is Spanish for ring finger. I will refer to these fingers as P, P-I-M-A from here on out. A simple arpeggio, first thing you will encounter, is whenever you apply A-M-I on any 3 consecutive strings, P will play the bass note. For example, a D chord is played simply like that. Now, arpeggios can be anywhere on 6 strings. Most of the times, those 3 fingers will be on 3 strings consistently. There's a G chord. There's a G chord. As long as you have those 3 fingers, one right after another, it really doesn't matter where your fingers are placed on the strings as long as they're consecutive, one right after the other. Now there's variations of arpeggios. For example, I played the natural 4-note arpeggio, and then I just reached over here to finish that with a 5-note arpeggio. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the alternation of fingers. Whenever you have a simple melody line, always keep consistent alternation. I-M, I-M. You can also use different variations like I-A, I-A, or M-A, M-A. Whenever we play a melody line that goes from string to string, in other words, we are going, we want to avoid a thing called cross fingering. An example of cross fingering would be if you were going from a note on the second string to the note on the first string. The most natural way would be in the form of an arpeggio, but a cross fingering would be when you don't stay with that form. In other words, the M is playing the second string and the I is playing the first string, and here's your cross fingering right there. You want to avoid that as much as possible, and that goes for the other fingers too. This is unlike an arpeggio. So whenever you have a run, always try to either alternate or repeat to avoid the cross fingering. There's some other techniques that I'll talk about as we get into the arrangements, and I'll talk about them when they come up. But some of those techniques include rolled chords. That's simply when you, instead of doing an arpeggio at regular speed, you actually speed it up to where it sounds like a strum, but each note is plucked individually. That's called a rolled chord. Another technique we're going to talk about is pizzicato. That's when you place the palm of your hand right there on the edge of the strings to create a muted effect. And most of those are plucked with the thumb. Also harmonics. That's when you are, when I use them in a lot of these songs, I will be plucking with my A finger and touching the harmonic point with my index finger. Take the 19th fret, for example. Just touch above the fret on the string. Don't have to push it down. You just have to make contact. And when you pluck, then you get your harmonics. Our first tune is We Are the Champions. It's probably the easiest in this program. It's in 6/8 time, and we're going to get into a lot of details after I play it for you.